They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it takes months of careful preparation, like a fine wine aging in the cellar, waiting for the perfect moment to uncork and savor every drop. Now, my name is Dave Rourke, and I'm about to tell you how my wife's betrayal became the catalyst for the most satisfying campaign of justice I've ever orchestrated. It started on a Tuesday morning in October, rain hammering our suburban Seattle home like nature's own percussion section. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone, when I heard Melissa talking to her friend Krista in the kitchen. Their voices carried that conspiratorial whisper women use when they think men aren't listening. "Honestly, Krista, I don't know how much longer I can pretend," Melissa said, her voice dripping with frustration. "Dave's so boring. All he cares about are those stupid comic books. When's the last time we did anything exciting?" I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. After 15 years of marriage, I thought I knew my wife. Apparently, I was wrong. "Maybe you need some adventure," Krista replied with a giggle. "Someone who actually pays attention to you." Trust me, I've been thinking about it. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I set down my mug and crept closer to the kitchen doorway, staying hidden behind the wall. "Speaking of which," Melissa continued, "I finally did something about Dave's ridiculous comic collection yesterday. Sold the whole dusty mess on eBay for $8,000. Used the money as a down payment on something special." My world tilted sideways. My comic collection? Gone. 25 years of careful collecting, hunting down rare issues at conventions, protecting them in climate-controlled storage. My pristine, amazing fantasy number 15, worth $60,000 alone. My complete run of X-Men number 143. My signed Stan Lee issues, all of it. $8,000? Krista sounded impressed. "That's amazing. What did you buy?" "Let's just say Trent and I found the perfect little place for weekend getaways." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Trent. The name landed like a punch to the gut. Trent Sanders, the flashy gym owner who'd been sniffing around our neighborhood barbecues, always finding excuses to talk to Melissa while flexing his artificially enhanced muscles. I backed away from the kitchen, my mind reeling. My wife had stolen my life's passion and used the money to fund her affair. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I almost admired its audacity. Almost. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the garage, needing to see the devastation with my own eyes. The climate-controlled storage room where I kept my collection stood open, empty shelves mocking me. 25 years of memories reduced to vacant space. My phone buzzed, a text from my 14-year-old son Ethan. "Dad, Mom said she sold your comics. I'm really sorry. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. At least someone in this house still had a conscience." I drove to my best friend Greg's comic shop downtown, my hands shaking with rage. Greg took one look at my face and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. "Let me guess," he said. Melissa finally snapped about the collection. "Sold it all for $8,000, I managed. Used the money to buy a love nest with that gym rat Trent." Greg's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "She what?" "You heard me. 25 years of collecting, including the amazing fantasy number 15, gone. For $8,000. "Dave, that collection was worth at least $250,000. Maybe more." "I know." "She just committed theft on a massive scale." "I know." Greg leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "So what are you going to do about it?" I stared out the window at the rain-soaked street, watching ordinary people go about their ordinary lives, blissfully unaware that my world had just imploded. A strange calm settled over me, the kind of clarity that comes when you realize you've been playing defense your whole life and it's time to go on the offense. "I'm going to make them pay," I said quietly. "Both of them, in ways they can't even imagine." Greg raised an eyebrow. "Legal ways, I hope." "Completely legal, but devastating." I turned back to him, feeling something cold and determined crystallizing in my chest. "You know what the beautiful thing about revenge is, Greg? When someone underestimates you so completely, they hand you all the weapons you need." That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Attorney Lisa Zhao had the kind of reputation that made opposing counsel break out in cold sweats. Sharp as a scalpel, relentless as a bloodhound, and expensive as a heart transplant. But when I explained my situation, her eyes lit up with the kind of predatory gleam that told me she was about to enjoy this case immensely. "Your wife sold property worth $250,000 for $8,000 without your consent?" She leaned forward across her mahogany desk. "Mr. Rourke, this isn't just theft. This is conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, and potentially fraud. What are my options? We sue for full restitution, damages, and legal fees. But first, we send a demand letter that'll make her lawyer wet his pants. She smiled like a shark scenting chum. I collect comics myself. What your wife did is sacrilege. While Lisa crafted her legal masterpiece, I began my own investigation. Melissa thought she was clever, but she'd left digital breadcrumbs everywhere. Her eBay account showed exactly what she'd sold and to whom. Her credit card statements revealed payments to a real estate company. Her text messages, backed up to our shared iCloud account, painted a picture of deception that would make Machiavelli proud. The most damning evidence came from her own arrogance. She'd bragged about the sale to her friends, posted photos of her decluttering success on social media, even sent a selfie to her sister with the caption, "Finally got rid of Dave's nerd cave." I screenshot everything. Next, I contacted every single eBay buyer. Most were collectors who'd stumbled onto incredible deals. When I explained what they'd actually purchased, their reactions ranged from shock to guilt to outright panic. "You're telling me this comic I bought for $200 is worth $15,000? Stammered Jerry from Portland, who'd scored my mint-condition Fantastic Foreigner 1. "That's exactly what I'm telling you, Jerry. My wife had no idea what she was selling." "Jesus, I feel terrible about this. What do you want me to do?" "Keep it. It's yours legally. But maybe mention to your collector friends how you got such an amazing deal. Word travels fast in our community." Within 48 hours, the comic collecting world was buzzing with the story of Melissa Rourke's catastrophic ignorance. Forums lit up with discussions about the Rourke collection massacre. Someone created a meme featuring Melissa's photo with the caption, "Sold Amazing Fantasy Shanshore 15 for $200. Ask me how." But the real fireworks started when Lisa's demand letter arrived. I was working in my home office when I heard Melissa's shriek from the kitchen. "Dave, get in here right now." I found her standing at the kitchen island, Lisa's letter spread before her like a crime scene photo. Her face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she held the document. "What is this?" she whispered. I glanced at the letter, pretending to read it for the first time. "Looks like a legal demand for restitution. $250,000 plus damages and attorney fees. Interesting. You can't be serious. They were just comic books." "Were they? Because according to this letter, you sold property worth $250,000 for $8,000. That's what lawyers call conversion." "I'm your wife. I have every right to sell things from our house." "Actually, you don't. Especially not my separate property that I owned before we married. But don't take my word for it. Call your lawyer." She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You're really going to sue me? Your own wife? You really stole from me to fund your affair with Trent. Your own husband?" The words hung in the air between us like a loaded weapon. Melissa's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her face cycling through denial, anger, and fear. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the screenshots of her text messages. "Really? Because these messages to Krista tell a different story. Should I read them out loud, or would you prefer to maintain the pretense?" Her shoulders sagged in defeat. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you want?" "Full restitution for the collection's value, public acknowledgement of what you did, and Trent's involvement in spending my money." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "Or we can let the lawyers handle everything. Your choice." Melissa's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went white. "It's Trent." "Better answer it. I'm sure he's got questions about that demand letter his lawyer just received." She answered with shaking hands. "Hello?" Even from across the kitchen, I could hear Trent's voice, high-pitched and panicked. "Melissa, what the hell is this legal document? They're saying I received stolen property worth thousands of dollars." I don't know." "Dave hired a lawyer." "You said those comics were worthless. You said your husband was an idiot." I cleared my throat. "Actually, Trent, I'm right here, and I can hear every word." Silence from the phone. "Here's the thing, Trent," I continued, walking closer to Melissa. "When you spend stolen money on a love nest, that makes you an accessory. Lisa Zhao is very good at explaining these concepts to juries." The line went quiet. Then, "This is insane. I'm not involved in any of this. The receipts say otherwise. The real estate payments, the romantic weekend getaways, all funded by my stolen collection. But hey, I'm sure a jury will believe your story about innocent coincidence." I could practically hear his brain working through the phone. "Look, Dave, maybe we can work something out. Man to man." "Man to man," I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You want to have a man-to-man conversation about how you helped my wife steal from me? Absolutely. Let's do that. Dave, no, Melissa whispered. Tomorrow night. Your gym. After closing. Just you, me, and an honest discussion about consequences. I hung up and turned to Melissa. You have 48 hours to figure out how you're going to pay restitution. After that, this gets very public, very expensive, and very embarrassing. She stared at me with something approaching awe. I never knew you had this in you. That was your first mistake. Underestimating me was your second. But the biggest mistake? I headed toward the door, pausing to look back, thinking I'd let you get away with it. That night, I called Greg to fill him in on the day's developments. So you're actually going to confront this Trent guy at his gym? Greg asked. Absolutely, but not the way he thinks. What do you mean? I smiled into the phone. Let's just say I've learned a few things about psychological warfare. Trent's about to discover that comic book nerds can be very creative when properly motivated. The next evening, I drove to Sanders Fitness with a gym bag full of surprises. Time to teach a muscle-bound moron about the difference between strength and intelligence. Sanders Fitness occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district, all exposed brick and gleaming chrome equipment. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Trent inside, pacing like a caged animal. He'd dismissed his staff early, just as I'd hoped. I parked across the street and opened my gym bag. Inside, a portable speaker, my phone loaded with some very interesting audio files, a small video camera, and a folder full of documents that would make Trent's evening unforgettable. The front door was unlocked. I walked in to find Trent bench-pressing what looked like twice his body weight, sweat glistening on his artificially bronzed skin. He racked the bar and sat up, trying to project confidence. Dave, glad you came. We need to clear the air about this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I set my bag down and pulled out the folder. Is that what we're calling theft and adultery now? Look, I had no idea those comics were valuable. Melissa said they were just junk you'd been hoarding. Interesting theory, except for these. I opened the folder and spread photos across the nearest bench. Screenshots of text messages, credit card statements, real estate documents. Seems like you two did quite a bit of planning for a spontaneous affair. Trent's eyes darted over the evidence, his confident facade cracking. You can't prove anything. Actually, I can prove everything, but I'm not here to debate evidence with you, Trent. I'm here to give you a choice. What kind of choice? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the portable speaker. You can publicly apologize for your role in this theft, make restitution for your share of the damages, and stay away from my wife. Or what? I pressed play on my phone. Melissa's voice filled the gym, crystal clear through the speaker. Trent's so much better than Dave. He actually knows how to make a woman feel wanted. Dave just sits in his basement with those stupid comics like a pathetic loser. Trent's face went pale. Where did you get that? Your girlfriend likes to talk, especially after a few glasses of wine. She recorded several voice memos for her friends, describing your relationship in very graphic detail. I paused the playback. Would you like to hear the rest? There's about 40 minutes of material. You're bluffing. I pressed play again. This time it was Trent's voice. Don't worry about Dave. Guy's a total pushover. Once we get rid of his comic collection, he'll have nothing left to hide behind. Then you can file for divorce and take him for everything. The color drained from Trent's face. That's taken out of context. Really? Because it sounds pretty clear to me. You and Melissa conspired to steal my property and use the proceeds to fund your affair. That's called racketeering, Trent. I walked over to the gym's sound system and plugged in my phone. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to play these recordings over your gym's PA system. Every sordid detail of your relationship with my wife, every plan to steal from me, every laugh at my expense. Then I'm going to upload them to social media, send copies to your clients, and make sure everyone in this neighborhood knows exactly what kind of man you are. You can't do that. It's harassment. Actually, it's public disclosure of relevant facts in a legal proceeding. Completely protected speech. I smiled. But I'm feeling generous tonight. You have one chance to avoid total humiliation. What do you want? $50,000? Your share of the restitution for what you helped steal, plus a written confession of your involvement. Plus you stay away from my wife and my family forever. Trent's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to fight me. Then he looked around his gym, probably calculating how much his business would suffer once these recordings went public. I don't have $50,000. Then you'd better figure out how to get it, because in 24 hours, this story goes viral whether you cooperate or not. The only question is whether you're portrayed as someone who made restitution for his mistakes or as a predator who helped a woman steal from her husband. I started packing up my equipment. Oh, and Trent, if you're thinking about trying to intimidate me or my family, remember that everything we've discussed tonight is being recorded. My lawyer has copies of everything. As I reached the door, Trent called out, "Why are you doing this? You could just divorce her and move on." I turned back, studying his confused face. "Because you both thought I was weak. You thought I'd just take it, roll over, let you destroy my life without consequences. You were wrong. But why go to all this trouble? It's just money." "It's not about the money, Trent. It's about respect. You took something precious from me, something irreplaceable, and treated it like garbage. Then you laughed about it." I opened the door. "Now you get to learn what it feels like." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Phase 1 was complete. Trent would either pay up or face public humiliation. Either way, he was finished. But Melissa was the real architect of this betrayal, and her reckoning was just beginning. I found her waiting in the living room, still in her work clothes, looking haggard and defeated. "How did it go?" she asked quietly. "Trent's going to make restitution for his share of the theft. $50,000. Her eyes widened. "He agreed to that?" "He didn't have much choice. Turns out those voice memos you recorded for your friends were very illuminating, especially the parts where you two planned this whole thing." Melissa's face crumpled. "Dave, I never meant for it to go this far." "Really?" "Because the recordings suggest otherwise. You and Trent spent months planning how to get rid of my collection and use the money for your affair. That's not a mistake, Melissa. That's a conspiracy." "What do you want from me?" "The same thing I wanted from Trent. Full restitution, public acknowledgement of what you did, and a promise to stay away from my son and me." "You can't keep me from Ethan. He's my son, too." "Actually, I can. Theft, adultery, and conspiracy to defraud are excellent grounds for supervised visitation. Ask your lawyer." She stared at me like I was a stranger. "When did you become so cold?" "When my wife stole from me to fund her affair. When she laughed about it with her friends. When she treated 15 years of marriage like a joke." I stood up. "You created this situation, Melissa. Now you get to live with the consequences." The next morning brought news that made everything worthwhile. Trent had liquidated his retirement account and borrowed against his gym to raise the $50,000. His written confession was waiting in my email, along with a promise to have no further contact with my family. One down, one to go. But Melissa wasn't going to be as easy to break. She had resources, connections, and a stubborn streak that had attracted me once upon a time. This was going to require a more sophisticated approach. Fortunately, I'd been planning for that possibility. Melissa always prided herself on her social media presence. Instagram posts showcasing our perfect family life, Facebook updates about her successful career in human resources, LinkedIn articles about workplace ethics and professional conduct. She'd built her reputation carefully over the years, cultivating an image of the devoted wife and mother who had it all together. That image was about to become her greatest vulnerability. I started with the eBay buyers. Most were decent people who felt genuinely terrible about profiting from Melissa's ignorance. When I suggested they might want to share their amazing finds with the collector community, they were more than happy to oblige. Within days, the story had spread across every comic book forum, Facebook group, and Reddit community imaginable. Photos of my stolen comics appeared everywhere, along with the prices Melissa had accepted. The Amazing Fantasy 115 that sold for $200, the X-Men #1 that went for $50, the complete run of Silver Surfer issues that fetched $35 total. The comic collecting world has a long memory and zero tolerance for people who destroy collections out of ignorance or spite. Melissa's name became synonymous with catastrophic stupidity. Memes featuring her photo spread like wildfire. Someone created a fake eBay listing. Priceless family heirlooms, wife doesn't know what they're worth, act fast. But social media was just the opening salvo. The real damage came when the story reached Melissa's professional network. I'd done my homework on her company's policies. Their data flow solutions had strict ethical guidelines about employee conduct, especially for HR personnel who were supposed to model appropriate behavior. Theft, adultery, and conspiracy to defraud weren't exactly the qualities they looked for in their human resources director. I crafted a carefully worded email to Melissa's boss, Margaret Hargrove, attaching documentation of the theft, the legal proceedings, and evidence of Melissa's affair. I framed it as a concerned citizen reporting potential ethical violations by someone in a position of trust. The response was swift and decisive. Melissa was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. "You got me suspended," she said when she confronted me that evening. I could lose my job over this. You stole $250,000 from me. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? It's not the same thing. That was personal. This is my career. Your career in human resources, where you're supposed to model ethical behavior and trustworthiness. How do you think your clients will feel when they discover their HR director is a thief and an adulterer? She slumped into a chair, the fight going out of her. What do you want me to do, Dave? I don't have $250,000. Then you'd better figure something out, because this is just the beginning. Over the next week, I systematically dismantled the social network Melissa had spent years building. Her friends received anonymous packages containing evidence of her theft and affair. Her book club got copies of the legal documents. Her yoga instructor learned about the stolen comics from a concerned student who happened to be a collector. The isolation was swift and complete. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls went unreturned. Her carefully cultivated social circle evaporated like morning mist. But the master stroke came when I targeted her family. Melissa's sister, Jennifer, had always been the golden child, the successful lawyer who'd married well and produced perfect grandchildren. She'd spent years looking down on me as the boring husband who wasn't good enough for her sister. Time to adjust that perspective. I sent Jennifer a complete dossier on Melissa's activities, along with a note. Thought you should know what your sister has been up to. The family reputation might be at stake. Jennifer's response was everything I'd hoped for. She called Melissa in a rage, threatening to cut off all contact unless Melissa made immediate restitution. Their parents, horrified by the scandal, demanded that Melissa fix the situation before it damaged the family name. The pressure was building from every direction. Work, friends, family, legal proceedings. Melissa was drowning in consequences, and I was just getting started. The breaking point came during Ethan's parent-teacher conference. Melissa had insisted on attending despite everything, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but word of her situation had spread through the school's parent network like wildfire. We sat in the hallway waiting our turn, surrounded by other parents who whispered and stared. I watched Melissa shrink into herself, her confidence crumbling under the weight of their judgment. "This is torture," she whispered. "This is justice," I replied. "You humiliated me for months, laughed about it with your friends, treated me like a fool, now you know how it feels." Mrs. Patterson, Ethan's teacher, called us in. The conference was awkward, filled with meaningful looks and carefully neutral language. But the message was clear. Everyone knew about our situation, and their sympathy lay entirely with me and Ethan. Walking back to our cars, Melissa finally broke. "I can't take this anymore. The whole town is talking about me. I can't go anywhere without people staring. My own sister won't speak to me." "Then make it right." "How? I don't have the money. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. My job is hanging by a thread." "What do you want me to do?" I stopped walking and turned to face her. "I want you to experience the same helplessness you put me through. I want you to understand what it feels like when someone you trust destroys something precious to you." "I get it, okay? I made a terrible mistake. I'm sorry." Sorry doesn't restore my collection. Sorry doesn't undo months of betrayal. Sorry is just a word you use when you get caught. She stared at me with something approaching fear. "What's happened to you, Dave? You used to be kind, forgiving. I used to be naive. There's a difference." That night, I received a call from Lisa Zhao with news that made all the social warfare worthwhile. "Melissa's lawyer wants to settle," she said. "They're offering full restitution plus damages. She'll liquidate everything she has and set up a payment plan for the rest." "What's the catch?" "She wants a confidentiality agreement. No more public discussion of the case." I considered this. The social damage was already done. Melissa's reputation was in ruins. Her career destroyed, her relationships shattered. A confidentiality agreement would prevent her from rebuilding by playing the victim. "Counteroffer," I said. "Full restitution, no confidentiality agreement, and she moves out of the house immediately. Ethan stays with me." "She'll never agree to give up custody." "She will when she realizes the alternative is a very public trial where all of this evidence gets presented in open court. Her affair, the theft, the conspiracy with Trent, everything." 2 days later, Melissa's lawyer called back. She'd accepted all terms. The house felt different after she moved out. Quieter, but also lighter somehow. Ethan seemed relieved, though he tried to hide it. We ordered pizza and watched old movies, just the two of us, rebuilding our relationship without Melissa's toxic presence. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more lesson to teach. One final demonstration of what happens when someone underestimates Dave Rourke. The grand finale was going to be spectacular. 3 months after Melissa moved out, I received an unexpected visitor. Trent Sanders stood on my doorstep, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. His gym had closed, his apartment was in foreclosure, and his golden tan had faded to a sickly yellow. "We need to talk," he said. I let him in, curious about what desperation might drive him to attempt. "This has gone far enough, Dave. You've destroyed both our lives. Isn't that enough?" I poured myself coffee, not offering him any. "Destroyed your lives. You did that yourselves when you decided to steal from me. It was just comic books. There it is. Even now, even after everything that's happened, you still don't get it." I sat down across from him. "Those weren't just comic books, Trent. They were 25 years of passion, dedication, and careful collecting. They were my connection to my childhood, my bond with my son, my escape from the stress of daily life. They were irreplaceable. But the money? The money was never the point. You and Melissa treated something precious to me like garbage. You laughed about it. You planned it. You thought I was too weak to fight back." I leaned forward. "You were wrong." Trent's hands clenched into fists. "You've taken everything from me, my business, my reputation, my future. What more do you want? I want you to understand consequences. I want you to know that actions have prices. I want you to remember this lesson for the rest of your life. And if I don't pay? If I just walk away and start over somewhere else?" I smiled. "Try it. See how far you get. The internet is forever, Trent. Your story will follow you wherever you go. Every potential employer, every new relationship, every fresh start will be haunted by what you did here." He stared at me with something approaching awe. "You're not the man I thought you were." "No, I'm not the man you thought I was. I'm not the man Melissa thought I was. Hell, I'm not even the man I thought I was. But I'm the man you created when you decided to steal from me." After Trent left, I called Greg to share the good news. The first payment from Melissa's restitution had arrived, and I was ready to start rebuilding my collection. "So what's the first purchase?" Greg asked. "Amazing Fantasy Summer 15. Found a CGC 9.6 that's almost identical to the one Melissa sold. It'll cost me $40,000, but it's worth every penny." "And Melissa? How's she handling the payments?" "About as well as you'd expect. She's working 3 part-time jobs, living in a studio apartment, driving a 15-year-old Honda. Her sister still won't speak to her. Her parents are embarrassed by the scandal. She's learning what it means to lose everything." "You sound almost sympathetic." "I am, in a way. But sympathy doesn't restore my collection or undo her betrayal. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them." The next morning brought news that made all the suffering worthwhile. Ethan bounded into the kitchen with his phone, grinning from ear to ear. "Dad, you have to see this. Mom's story made it onto one of those true crime podcasts. The Comic Book Caper, a tale of greed and stupidity." I listened to the podcast over breakfast, marveling at how the hosts had captured every detail of Melissa's catastrophic decision-making. They interviewed collectors who'd bought pieces of my collection, legal experts who explained the charges, and even a psychologist who analyzed the mentality of someone who would steal from their spouse. "The most fascinating aspect of this case," the psychologist said, "is how completely the perpetrator misunderstood her victim. She saw a quiet, bookish man and assumed he was weak. She couldn't have been more wrong." The podcast had over 2 million downloads in its first week. Melissa's humiliation was now national entertainment. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. My old college roommate called after hearing the podcast. "Dave, Jesus, man, I had no idea you'd become such a badass. The way you systematically destroyed those two is legendary. You're like the patron saint of wronged husbands everywhere." Similar calls came from high school friends, former coworkers, distant relatives who'd heard the story through various channels. Everyone wanted to congratulate me on my victory, to tell me how inspiring my refusal to be victimized had been. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely proud of myself. The final chapter of this saga came 6 months later. I was browsing Greg's shop when a familiar figure walked through the door. Melissa, looking tired and worn, approached the counter where I was examining a mint condition Fantastic Four nor 5. "Hello, Dave?" "Melissa." I didn't look up from the comic. "What brings you to Greg's shop?" "I wanted to see what you were rebuilding, to understand what I destroyed." I finally looked at her. She'd lost weight, aged noticeably, and there was something broken in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "This is a nice copy," I said, holding up the comic. "Not as perfect as the one you sold, but it'll do." "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know that doesn't mean much now, but I need you to know that I understand what I did. I understand what those comics meant to you." "Do you? Because for months you called them junk, worthless clutter, a waste of money and space." "I was wrong. About the comics, about Trent, about everything. I threw away 15 years of marriage for a fantasy that lasted 3 months. I set down the comic and really looked at her. The confident, dismissive woman who'd mocked my passion was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned hard lessons about consequences. What do you want, Melissa? I want to know if there's any chance, someday, that you might forgive me. I considered the question seriously. Could I forgive her? Should I? Maybe, I said finally. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. Too much has happened for that. I know, I needed to ask. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Ethan talks about you all the time. How proud he is of his dad, how much he's learned from watching you handle this situation. You raised an amazing son. We raised an amazing son. That's the one thing we got right. After she left, Greg emerged from the back room where he'd been pretending not to eavesdrop. How do you feel? He asked. Satisfied. Complete. Like I finally got justice for what was done to me. I picked up the Fantastic Four comic again. She destroyed something precious to me, so I destroyed something precious to her. Her reputation, her social standing, her sense of security, fair trade. And now? Now I focus on rebuilding the collection, my relationship with Ethan, my own sense of self-worth. The revenge is finished. Time to move forward. I bought the comic and drove home, where Ethan was waiting with homework questions and stories about his day. We ordered Chinese food and watched a Marvel movie, surrounded by the beginnings of my new collection. As I tucked him into bed that night, Ethan looked up at me with serious eyes. Dad, I'm proud of how you handled everything with Mom. You could have been mean or cruel, but you just made sure there were consequences for what she did. That's all justice really is, son, making sure actions have appropriate consequences. Will you teach me how to stand up for myself like that? Every day, I promised. Every single day. Later, alone in my rebuilt comic room, I opened the new Amazing Fantasy number 15 and read The Origin of Spider-Man. The same story that had captivated me as a child, that had started my collecting journey, that had ultimately led to the most important lesson of my adult life. With great power comes great responsibility. But sometimes, with great patience, comes great justice. And sometimes, that's enough.